Welcome to Sex and the Solo Girl. Join your host, her inner circle, and expert guests weekly for chats about dating, secure attachment, the solo lifestyle, doing relationships differently, and of course, sex. And here's your host, Janice Formichella.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast network, because I am going to be dropping this very special, powerful episode on Sex and the Solo Girl and breakups, broken hearts, and moving on. So hello to both audiences. And hello, this I think is going to be the only time I will get to say this. And that is welcome to the show, Janice.
Yay! Thank you, Janice.
Janice Selbie, hello. We were introduced through a mutual contact, I would say, and it just tickles me pink whenever I even come across anyone named Janice. Even like if it's on TV, for instance, it's so surprising. Though there are some high-profile TV Janices, obviously Friends, and Janice Soprano, actually, from The Sopranos.
Well, I grew up in the 70s, so Janice was also a Muppet. She was in the rock band.
So we've got some pop culture Janices, but meeting one in real life is, I can count on one hand every single time that I've ever met a Janice. And I actually think it's 3 and you are 4. So anyways,
did they call you Janny? They called me Janny when I was little.
No, people tried to call me Jan, which I just never liked. Janice is much more exotic. But in high school, I started going by Jan. And I don't go by that as much anymore, maybe because I don't have as many friends, who I've known for years and years and years who call me that. But that was actually quite special to me. Anybody who called me Jan. Yeah. And I've tried to get it going with my new community, but it hasn't really taken off. And I even had a novelty plate on one of my cars that said Jan. Besides having the same name, though, we also have the shared experience, and I feel emotional already, of leaving high demand religions. Janice is the author and the producer and host of Divorcing Religion, podcast and book. So I'm very grateful to have been introduced to you. I am very active in the ex-Mormon community, as you know, and I think you're doing great work. We're going to talk about sexual shame today, which I know is something that you're very passionate about raising awareness around. Is that what you would say?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like I experienced it, and I also feel like I inadvertently potentially contributed to it when I was very brainwashed and indoctrinated as a religious mother. Mm-hmm.
I have one thing in particular that I was only 16, and so what can I do? But I still to this day have deep regret over outing someone. But we'll talk about that. Can you please tell us, before we get into this, about the podcast and the book, Divorcing Religion?
Oh, sure. Yes. So you can see the book behind me. It's called Divorcing Religion, a Memoir and Survival Handbook. And just like it says, the first part of the book is my story, my memoir, about being raised Pentecostal and then doing a deep dive with the Holdeman Mennonites for many years. And I was married to a pastor, homeschooled my children. And then one day it just stopped working for me. And so then I kind of talk about my life after that. And then the handbook is something I developed because I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. And I saw that there was a real need for some structure for people to see how their deconstruction and deconversion process could go. And so that's the second half of the book. And I do also have the Divorcing Religion podcast, Divorcing Religion YouTube channel. And on that YouTube channel, that's where I post sessions from my conferences, the Conference on Religious Trauma and Shameless Sexuality, Life After Purity Culture. Those are my big events, and they're on the YouTube channel.
And my aspiration would definitely be to get more involved. I want to be a speaker someday. I have been on Divorcing Religion. I will link to that in the show notes. Thank you for having me. I talked about family estrangement, which is important for this community. Let's get into the heart of this. And thank you for having me. I'm so blessed that I get to raise awareness about estrangement. I think it would be great to talk about our experiences. You did just say that you had left religion and then been with the Mennonites, which I saw, and that kind of blew my mind. But kind of in a nutshell, when it comes to leaving religion and then dealing with sexual shame, can you just tell us a little bit about that? I may interject a little with my own experience, and then I'll share, because I think that the Mormons do it brilliantly. They're probably one of the better religious establishments when it comes to leaving people with sexual shame trauma that will last their entire lives. So I'll tell a little bit about mine as well. But please.
Yeah, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and so we didn't have a name for it as purity culture back then. It's just how good girls, got my air quotes going, good girls were supposed to keep their legs closed, that idea. And my parents were religious. I grew up in a Pentecostal home. And so certainly my mother let me know that it was expected that I would, not have sex until I was married. And I would get messages like, she used to say, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free? That's how men think of, that's how men think of women when it comes to sex.
For how men think.
That's right. Yes. And I also was very active in my church and my youth and young adult group. And so certainly the expectation was that no one was fooling around or having sex. I can't speak to what anybody else was doing at that time, but I know I was watching myself. And then towards the end of high school, I stopped going to church. We called it backsliding in the day. I had a non-Christian boyfriend, and after 3 years together, we did end up having sex, and I was 19 at the time. And then, to my horror, he broke up with me not long after, just, a few months after. And then all the messages from my mother and from my church, and you're not pure, you're chewed gum, you're, any of those things.
Chewed gum. We do that in the Mormon church too.
Oh, so gross. Yeah. You're dirty Kleenex, you're whatever. And it all just came crashing down on me. And I felt so unlovable. I felt like, who would ever want to be with me after I gave away the most important aspect of myself, as if I was nothing more than, my vagina and my virginity. So that was a really hard time. And actually, to try and cope with it, I became a barfly. I became, I was desperate to prove that other men would still find me attractive and would still want to be with me. So then I really went the other direction and just had multiple one night stands as I tried to prove to myself that I was still someone that other people would want to be with. And that was, that went on for a lot of time. And that was when AIDS was just really starting to come to the forefront. So part of my sexual experience back in the late 80s, early 90s was scheduling regular trips to the clinic to make sure that I, hadn't caught anything. And I did know people at that time who did have AIDS. And we didn't have any kind of cure for it or adequate medication back then. So it was a death sentence back then. But anyway, so that was, very distressing for me. And then I ended up having a back to Jesus moment, went back to church, and was, profoundly pure from that time on. I wouldn't look at or touch or, anything. And then
look at her.
Right. And then my pastor set me up with this fellow from the young adult group, and we did end up getting married, even though really the main thing we had in common was that we were both crazy, religious fanatics, kind of, especially me. But I remember talking to the pastor before we got married, and I was like, I'm so dirty. He deserves someone who's pure. And my pastor said, I declare you to be a secondary virgin. You are a secondary virgin. It's just like you never had sex. So, and I mean, bless him, I guess, for trying to,
Yeah, because that might have
help me
felt
feel
even
better.
almost empowering. Did he?
It felt like a relief to
Okay.
me.
Did
It
he
felt like,
suggest that this needed to be shared with your partner?
oh, I was very honest anyway.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
my partner, no, he was pure. And I'm saying pure as in from the Christian standpoint. He had not had sex before when I got married to this person. We were in our
Wow.
mid-20s. And so then, we went on to have almost 20 years together. And then the marriage did end. And then I was really back into the dating world and moved in with someone and started exploring open relationship, what that's like. And here I am now, all these years later. I'm remarried. I'm in a monogamous relationship with my husband. He does know that I'm bisexual and that I've enjoyed being with women and men, and he loves me exactly as I am, just like I love him exactly as he is. And that's my story in a nutshell.
It is rough for us who have lived this life to just do anything in a nutshell. I'm just curious. So when I left, I had this big chunk of time, maybe even 10, 15 years when I was not involved with the ex-Mormon community at all. So I lived in Australia for 5 years. And then when I came back, I found that even though I had been out since I'm older than I look. I'd been out for about 20 years. And like as soon as I came back to America, it was like, contact with my family, contact with people trying to get in touch with me about how they should leave. And I just thought I'm going to have to get involved somehow, because if you're out for 20 years and it still impacts your life, that was why I became an organizer. Was your experience a little different? Because you had been out for a long time before you started really diving into having this as your professional identity.
Right. I think I started questioning when I was around 38 to 40. And then in my early 40s, that's when I really was deconstructing, and I left my husband at that point. I say divorced my religion and my husband around the same time.
Right.
And now I'm 15 years later here, and it's only been since 2020. In 2020, I started working on the conference on religious trauma. 2018, I wrote the workshop, and so everything has just snowballed and got bigger and bigger since then over the last 5 years or so.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, same. I think I'm 4 years into my organizing. I won't take as much time with mine, but I was raised in a very, very devout Mormon family. And despite what anybody sees on any of the pop culture reality shows, it's way stricter than that. That's actually one thing that bums me out with all of the focus on the LDS church, is that I don't think anyone comes even close to portraying what I experienced growing up. And that is that your sexual activity, you start being questioned about it when you're only 8. And then that goes on and on and on. And it's basically like communal knowledge. If you do anything, which would, yes, we also don't have sex before marriage, that can get you in a lot of trouble. But also, it's not just about not having sex. It's about, like not not having like your breast touch, for instance, or your butt touch. Like that would be something that you would definitely be required to go and confess.
That is so invasive.
It was a lot. And also, as somebody who was popular, had boyfriends, but also just like a completely normal libido. I never had sex until I was out of the church. And then I just wanted to get it over with, so that's kind of a sad story, but just basically there was lots of sexual shaming growing up. And if you did anything bad enough, it would eat at you. I remember going to confession many times. And I think in my senior year of high school, I had a boyfriend, and it was actually a really sweet relationship. But anytime, he was older than me and had his own place, and we did fool around quite a bit. But like I said, never had sex. And I think on like the third time that I went to confess to my bishop, he just full on went and just told my parents everything. And I remember one day I was in Sunday school, and the secretary of our ward came and asked me, oh, this is so bad. He came to say that the bishop wanted to talk to me in front of everybody, by the way. And so I go and I walk into my bishop's office and my parents are sitting there. And he had told them everything. And then I had to just sit there. And I mean, they were both dismayed, embarrassed, all of it. And I remember just sitting in there and just sobbing in front of everybody because he just like wore me down. And it was humiliating. So I did end up leaving the church, partially because I was forced to go to BYU. And I got out really early, which I'm glad for. Clearly, I was not meant to be a part of this religion. And so I felt, because I had left so early and I was gung-ho, like, this church is stupid. and like one of the first things I thought when I decided I wasn't going to be a Mormon anymore is, now I'm 19 and I'm probably like the only virgin in my friend group. And I didn't want to be known as a virgin. And I just like kind of hooked up with a guy. He had no idea, but I just kept on telling myself like, but at least you don't have to tell anyone you're a virgin anymore. And I was so relieved. It was not romantic or anything. So
it was like a burden that you wanted to alleviate yourself.
I thought about it all the time. I had actually been dating somebody who was much older than me. For a 19-year-old, I think he might have been 28 or something. And I really liked him and wanted to have sex. And because I'd never had sex before and he was quite well endowed, it didn't work out. And I remember he was like, this is so bad. I remember he was like, are you sure you've done this before? And I said yes. But then like the next day I went back to him and I said I hadn't. And you could just see in his face, like, and he even said to me, and you want to give it to me? Like, because we were dating and hanging out, but and I was like, yeah, totally. And he was like not having any of it, which, I guess good for him, kind of. But then like I felt rejected because of that.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, no, it was a challenging time, but I wouldn't say I felt shame. I did then have a few partners, and then I ended up getting with someone who I ended up marrying a few years later. And I left all of the like shit from my religion behind. I will definitely say I have friends who are ex-Mormon for years now who still say they feel embarrassment and shame around sex. I did not. However, I just want to touch on this really quickly. I was with a man who wanted sex all the time. And if we did not have sex at least several times a week, I got the cold shoulder. I got blaming. A couple times he said that he had to masturbate more because of this. He would, give me the silent treatment. And so that carried me for a few years. And I wouldn't say I felt shame, but I felt shamed. One time I had gone overseas, and so we hadn't had sex for 10 days. And then I came back and I had jet lag. And he was so furious that I had not slept with him as soon as I came back. I actually was giving a presentation the next day at my college for a fundraiser I was doing for Afghan women. And he just randomly doesn't show up. And all of my friends are like, where's Colin? And I'm like, I don't know. He's upset about something. And he told me that night it was because he had thought that when I got back, I was going to sleep with him. That's where I'm coming from. However, right now, very sexually happy. I've always been explorative. When we got divorced, I started experimenting like almost instantly. I think I had my first threesome like 4 or 5 months after. It was a great experience.
Nice.
And since then, I've been into kink stuff. I've had wonderful partners, very open about, I have a sex podcast. So I feel I've left it in my past, but a lot of listeners maybe haven't.
Right. Wow. I thank you for the work that you're doing in this community just to normalize sexuality and things like being a part of the kink community, exploring these different aspects of ourselves. And also, in some ways, that means confronting some of the unhealthy messages, toxic purity culture indoctrination that we received. And I work with people who have found their time in the BDSM community to be profoundly healing, as it is teaching them it's all about consent.
Yeah.
And consent is something that we're not really told about when we're growing up in fundamentalist religious homes.
And that is, it's one of the most destructive things that establishments like the Pentecostal religion, the Mormon religion, all we're taught is to not do it. We're not taught anything about, consent, control over our own bodies, making decisions on our own. I mean, if you're not meant to do it, why would your parents teach you about consent? But it did make it hard for me to communicate about sex for a while. But
and I think it sets up relationships also for failure when we are taught that, you have to have that emotional distance. You're not even to think about sex. You're not to touch yourself. You're not to be masturbating or enjoying sexuality. But then you say these magic words in front of some people and in front of your God. I got my air quotes going. And then you can flip that switch. And it's just going to be amazing and so blessed such blissful sex. But if you don't know your body and you don't know your partner's body and they don't know anything about you, and I mean, heaven forbid, if only they've seen porn and maybe not the best porn, they might have very wrong ideas about what works for you and what you like. And then if you haven't been taught that you can express your likes and dislikes, oh my gosh, it can just set relationships up for a whole lot of dysfunction and dissatisfaction.
And not only do these establishments encourage people not to talk about sex and explore their own bodies, we're generally avoidant. And so people are generally not good at communicating because you try to sweep things under the rug. And so, it's just, this is why so many people from our churches are getting divorced. You touched on something in the Pentecostal religion, or your church, at least your community. How was masturbation viewed?
It just wasn't talked about. Certainly wasn't anything that was addressed from the pulpit. No.
Okay. Because in ours, I'm not sure if you know this about the LDS, but we are explicitly not supposed to masturbate. And it's in all of the literature. It's in the handbook.
Wow.
And you know how I told you we start getting asked about these things at 8. So that's when they first will ask you. And then every time you want to go to the temple to, do the baptisms, do some of the rites, in order to get approved to go in there, you have to have what's called, like your worthiness interview. And they will ask you as part of that if you masturbate. So that
is so offensive.
Well, I mean, I didn't know any better though. I mean, I'm
right, of course.
I never thought anything of it. And it was after I left and something about it had come up in college. And I just mentioned, like they would ask us. And I remember someone being like, whoa, you had a middle-aged man asking you in private if you masturbate.
That's
and I was
disturbing.
like, yeah. And they were shocked. And I said, never would have thought anything was even weird about it, to be honest. And of course, growing up, I thought it was dirty, so I didn't do it. But I just think of all the boys who either had to lie or confess all the time. Because, it's the most natural part of growing up as a male. So let's talk about how sexual shame and being raised in a purity culture environment, how did you see it show up in your ability to form healthy relationships, maybe as you started to distance yourself or not? Because I know that this can completely destroy marriages, prevent people from having any type of intimacy in their life. So how did it show up for you or for maybe your clients, if that's okay to say, or how have you seen it shown up? How about we put it that way?
Sure. Yeah, I think it also can have so much to do with family of origin. It's really hard to tease apart religious trauma, purity culture, and family of origin trauma because a lot of times it's all happening in the
in
the
my
same
mind, I see it
space.
as all
Yeah,
surely okay.
right. And so we often tend to relate to our partner the way that it was modeled for us, how we saw our parents relate to each other. So I had a father who was volatile, emotionally volatile, immature narcissist, and a mother who was very codependent. And so I saw that her place was to constantly bend over backwards, do anything to please this, man who was essentially acting like a big baby. And he was never able to fully engage emotionally like an adult. So those are some things that I took with me then even into my marriage. And the person that I married the first time around, very nice person, good person. I want people to know that. I don't consider him a bad person at all. But we both were indoctrinated, as I mentioned. He had not engaged in sex before we were married, and I had. I felt like we actually had a very enjoyable sex life together, but it was quite vanilla, quite missionary style, because that's how we were trained, even though I knew there were other things I was curious about and other ways that I would have enjoyed it. But there are some hard limits that Christianity puts on what's considered acceptable. So I didn't even, I thought I really managed to keep a lid on my desires and stuff like that. But as we were getting near the end of our marriage, like I said, I was losing my faith and I was wanting more for myself. And at one time I said to him, I think that I actually might be bisexual. And he said, like, well, is that supposed to be a surprise? Because he says that's not a surprise to me.
Okay.
So he had picked up on that, I guess, throughout the years, but by whatever way, if I was giving the side eye to people or if I was making comments when we were being intimate together. So he had picked up on that. But eventually, yeah, I got to the point where I wasn't satisfied with what we had. And I knew that I wanted out. I wanted more and I wanted out. And so I ended up going outside the bounds of our marriage and I was intimate with somebody else. And that to me, the shame that I felt, the guilt that I felt actually after that, because it's not acceptable to cheat on your partner. And that's what I did. And that took quite a toll, I think, on me. But once we were, and I did, I was forthcoming. We did talk about it. You can read about it in the book.
Yes, please, everyone. Divorcing Religion, go and buy it.
Yes. And so then when we ended the marriage, so we were separated, and I had met someone else and was living with them. It was not the person that I had cheated with. That person wasn't in the picture at all. That was a one-time thing. But so the fellow that I moved in with was wealthy, and that was a shock to me. Like I came from a background of kind of poverty and a lot of lack, and so suddenly I'm with someone who owns a luxury travel company, and so it's taken me around the world, different places, see things I've never seen before. And he also got a real kick out of me. He knew I came from a very religious and kind of repressed background. He said, whatever you want, I'm here for it. Don't worry about how much it costs. Don't worry. And so there were drugs and drinking and sex opened wide up because I was curious and I felt like, well, I don't believe in God anymore. I'm not bound by marriage, legal, whatever anymore. I'm living with this person. I want to enjoy my life to the full. I will deny myself nothing. And so that's what happened. I decided I would deny myself nothing. And I said, I'm curious about being with other people, inviting other people into our bedroom. Let's explore some of this. And because he also had said he wasn't keen on fences. He didn't want to be hemmed in, is what he said. And so I said, okay, well then, within the limits, I can understand that. If you want to be with other people when you're out of town traveling, as long as you're careful and you don't bring anything nasty back to me, I'm fine with that. But I don't want you being with other people in this town where I live, where people
Yeah.
I know are. That seemed reasonable. And I said I also don't want you forming emotional attachments with any other person. So
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
I'm
I'm
the
like
one.
kind of the opposite. I don't want to hear about my partner's sex life, but I go and, my partner's married actually. I'm like, I'm hoping they get along,
Right,
That's not
right.
as
Yeah.
confronting to me. That's so interesting how different people see
Yeah.
things. Mhm.
Right. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so those were the rules that I set out. And then we would, just meet people in town. There's different groups you can belong to or
Yep.
sign up for different things or whatever. And we would go and meet a couple or a single or whatever and see if we felt any chemistry there or have them over and see if we felt any chemistry. And sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. But for the most part, I thought it was enjoyable. But even before that, I had gone out on my own. Like I'd started a dating profile that I was just interested in meeting women. So I knew that that was something that was exciting for me and that I enjoyed it and felt comfortable with that. So I've been with both and enjoyed both. So anyway, yeah, I didn't feel shame.
I was just
Yes.
feeling like when I left the church, that's how we put it in ex-Mormon world. When I left the LDS faith, I seriously, from the beginning, felt the weight of the world lifted off of me. When I thought to myself for the first time that I could resign, I felt peace. I knew it was the right decision. I felt
Oh,
free. And so I
yeah.
did a lot. Still do. I wanted to really quickly touch on the issue of bisexuality because in the ex-Mormon community, it is very prevalent. I believe partially because bisexuality and experimenting with the same sex would be something that you would maybe naturally or tend to do as you're coming and when you're in your formative years sexually. And so I wanted to see what you had to say about that as a counselor. I almost immediately also started experimenting with women. I felt attracted to females. I had sex with a lot of women.
Mhm.
I don't consider myself bisexual. I'm not out dating women. I have to say that that's not how I identify. But it was something that I not just dipped my toe in, but I was like, whoa.
Okay.
Yeah. So have you seen it more prevalently in the divorcing religion, post religion community? And like, why do you think that is? Like, I would just love to
Yeah.
speak to this because as somebody who's organizing these groups, I've just found it fascinating the entire time how many self-identified bisexuals there is. Seriously, got to be like 60% or something.
Wow. And are you thinking mostly women?
A lot of my male friends too. It's
Right.
more
Okay.
females, but it's a lot of dudes too who I think
Sure.
are enjoying experimenting.
Our society is very hypocritical, and it's okay to be turned on by two women together, but you get messages that it's not okay to be
Yeah,
turned on
that's
by two
another
men together, and that's
spectrum.
really sad and unfortunate. Um, yeah, I think it has so much to do with the messaging that we receive, and sometimes also the confusing messages, especially that people assign female at birth. We want you to be sexy, but we also want you to be pure. We want you to have carnal knowledge so you can turn us on and do all these things. But then we also want to make sure that you're virgin, even
Yeah,
though it's
like
just a
once
lot
we
of,
own you, we want you to be sexually enthusiastic and skilled,
right?
but
Oh,
only
yeah.
when you belong to me.
Right, right. And so part of it might be like how when people leave the church and they're more inclined to start exploring, forbidden fruit makes the tastiest jam. That is something that I say, and I believe that it is often true. And so we may go rushing out and try all these things that were formerly off limits. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just always need to be mindful and careful of our own safety, of the safety of other people. That consent is involved. But I think, yeah, they're shaking off these religious chains that really bound them and told them you have to have traditional gender roles. That's all that's acceptable. But we see that actually that's not how people are when it comes to their sexuality and what they enjoy. There's a wide range of things that people enjoy, and it's not character flaw. It's good to be curious. It's good to explore and learn about yourself. Yes,
yeah,
it's
my
fun.
experiences were great. Do you think that there is any harm or danger or risk in like starting to like really self-identify and cling to these terms, like I am bisexual, I am this? Do you think, I mean, because I think sexual activity doesn't necessarily equate to, sexual identity. Do you think this is all just part of exploring things after leaving religion, and that people should just play around with these terms, even though sometimes it's like a complete evolution of, like I said, your self-identity?
Right. For some people, the labeling aspect is very important because maybe they see that there have been legal protections afforded to the LGBT community, even though in the United States it's taken massive steps backwards right now. But also I do warn people against putting on hard identities,
That's how I feel.
very quickly. You're allowed to try something on, see if it fits. If you're chafing, if it's itchy, you don't like it, you can take it off. You can try something else. You're in charge of yourself, and you get to decide what feels good to you, what doesn't feel good to you, and whether you want to associate yourself with a label. You can just be someone. Well, and that's maybe where the idea of pansexuality is nice, because it's like, well, I'm attracted to whom I'm attracted to. They may be male, they may be female, they may be somewhere in the middle. It's all right, and it's nobody's concern except my own.
And it is good that we have different labels. And I mean, I would say there's like 3 reasons why people leave the church, and probably either the first or second is because they're just fucking sick of the homophobia. So of course they're open to it. Janice, I want to take a quick commercial break, and then when we come back, we are going to get to the juice, which is ways to begin to maybe address, work on, overcome. I don't know if we can ever really fully overcome some of these things. We're going to talk about starting the work when it comes to sexual shame. Before we take a break, can you one more time tell us about the conference and the book, anything you want to really drive home with my audience, who is very receptive, and I'm going to be sharing this in the ex-Mormon community as well. So
thank you so much. Thanks for this opportunity. So coming up very soon in May 24th and 25th online, I'm having the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference. Now, this was originally going to be in Seattle, but because of the political climate and fears of persecution in the queer community, and some of my speakers and attendees are queer, I decided safer just to hold it online. So it's happening online. People can go to shamelesssexuality.org, and I tell them org stands for orgasm, of course, shamelesssexuality.org, and they can get their tickets there. And on the tickets, because I'm doing it online now, I've been able to slash the ticket prices. So $99 US gives an all access ticket. You can attend the online live event and participate in Q&A, and you get access to the recordings after. But I also have a $50 resources ticket, and that is just for the recordings only. So maybe someone's busy on the weekend, they won't be attending live, or maybe they're just really pinched financially right now. They could just spend $50 and get the recordings after. And so I have people from many different backgrounds who are experts in sexuality and religious trauma and purity culture, who will be sharing and talking throughout the weekend. It's going to be a really exciting time. The other thing I have is people can go to divorcingreligion.com, and that is my website, because I am a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach and consultant. So I work with people from all around the world. I see people over Zoom, and I help them with whatever's going on as they're recovering from their religious trauma. So people can either book a free consultation, they can join one of my free online support groups, they can have access to my YouTube channel, channel for free, or they can make an appointment to meet with me and we can start doing the work together.
And I think if there are any ex-Mormons listening, you might want to think about this. I hear from a lot of ex-Mormons that, we do tell a lot of the same stories because of our shared backgrounds, and that coming and joining people from other religions, you might find very refreshing. And you might find that maybe you even have more fun telling your story because people are going to be more taken back by the toxicity of this freaking thing. I am passionate about the opportunity that a breakup gives us for a fresh start, but it can sure be hard to see that when you're heartbroken, right? I have worked with people all around the world to beat their breakups with my own 3-part process. I've created an ebook that guides readers through each step using practical advice straight from an experienced breakup coach. Click on the link at the top of the show notes and get your copy of the Broken Heart Repair Kit, the 3-step method for beating your breakup, at my special Sex and the Solo Girl release price of just $24.99. And remember, you've got this. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for listening to my ad. Thank you to Janice Selbie for being here. Once again, go and check out divorcingreligion.com. We are now going to talk about overcoming, processing, approaching sexual shame. I really think some people are going to listen and perhaps realize that this is playing a role in their life. But first, Janice, you mentioned to me that you would like to speak to the difference between shame and guilt. And I want to learn from you. What are the differences and why is this important to you to make sure we cover?
Yeah. So guilt typically has to do with an action. We feel guilty about something that we've done. Shame is typically more about who we are. It's internalized messages that we have. So I picture shame like someone coming to you with a big package, and on the front of it says shame, and you're standing there and they're trying to give you this package of saying, here, you must take this. I insist that you take this. And when we're children, we don't know better. We just stick out our hands and say, okay, mom, or okay, whomever this older person is that is judgmental, critical, shaming.
Bishop.
That's right. And so we don't know better. So we just take that shame from them. But I want your listeners and your audience to know shame belongs to someone else, not to you. It's the person who's trying to shame you, to put it on you, to insist that you take it. And they don't even realize that it's a message that they have internalized from someone else. So it's really about internalized messages. I mean, we're talking about sexual shame today, but it can be as simple as something if a little child is learning to tie their shoe and they're not getting it right, and the parent is getting angry and critical and criticizing them. And so the kid's thinking not just that they're doing it wrong, but something is wrong with them, because they're not understanding, even though maybe the person trying to teach them is a poor teacher, if they're not understanding it. So typically shame is internalized messages that we have received from someone else. And I often think of our parent is the first person to reflect our worth and our value back to us. So if it's like a mirror they're holding up, but sometimes that mirror is cracked or broken. And so the picture that we're getting of ourselves might be distorted just because the parent has some issues there. So I think that's an important difference to realize between guilt and shame.
Thank you so much. And a lot of that resonates with me. This bishop went out of his way to tear me down. So I had already been accepted to BYU. And when I went and confessed to him, like I said, it must have been the 3rd time within a year or something. He actually called up the school and told them what I had done and tried to get them not to accept me. Because when you go to BYU, you also have to go through all these interviews and things, and you have to be, morally clean. And they still accepted me, but it's like, how obsessed he became with me.
Exactly. Repression leads to obsession. And that's what happens. That's what we see with the purity culture, indoctrination, that whole thing. When people are demanding that people be abstinent, they are trying to control girls and women and boys and men. They're trying to control other people, which, by the way, is something that cults love to do.
Oh, yeah. And I was, maybe some Mormon communities, people wouldn't feel that way, but I do think that I am a cult survivor. Where do we begin if someone is listening and thinking to themselves that they've got a lot of unprocessed sexual shame? What's the starting point here?
Well, we know that sexual shame, we can experience that when we can't reconcile our sexual desires and experiences with what we were taught is acceptable. So maybe we want more, maybe we want less, maybe we want it differently. We want to try different things, and we've been told that is wrong. You are wrong. It is bad and immoral to enjoy a certain type of sexual activity. So that's where the shame can come in. The first thing I encourage people to do is start to explore the messaging that they received around sex and sexuality. And so we want to think about things like, who gave me this message? How old was I? What was their role in my life? So this can help us be gentler with ourselves. I mean, if you're a child and you're indoctrinated, or even a teenager, and there's lots of manipulation, all these things going on there, we're not responsible for what other people tell us or do to us. So it's really giving yourself some grace from the start. So we want to explore those messages, and even potentially writing them down. This is just basic cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah. And then thinking of what are more positive and accurate messages that we can give ourselves in place of that. And I wish it was as easy as flipping a switch. For most people, that's not the case, especially if we were told something over and over again. And so I also encourage people to give themselves permission to start exploring what feels good to them. So I often talk about life being like a buffet table, and there's delectable, beautiful dishes, which are experiences as far as the eye can see. Religion would have us starve to death at that buffet table of life, because religion says, nope, that's not for you. You don't get to try that. You get this one meal.
They want us to close ourselves to just the most intrinsic part of being human.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when you're very religious or grow up in a very religious home, curiosity quickly gets stamped out in favor of obedience. Obedience is more important than anything else. And so if we've divorced religion, we are opening ourselves up to curiosity again. And so I want people to get curious about what feels good for them. Okay. What do they like? And so that doesn't mean, someone who has been really, really sheltered, that I'm going to tell them to go and rent some wild, porn movie or whatever. Dungeon. Right. We don't have to do things in extremes. And in fact, extremes may be part of what our problem was, being in fundamentalism. So we can gently, watch a rom-com. What do I like about this movie? I'm looking at the relationship of these characters. Is there anything that appeals to me? Do I even find any of the characters attractive? Like, we can start gently just to ask these questions cute. And learn about ourselves. Yeah, I like it. But that's not to say that. I do not have a problem with porn. I am really a fan.
Would love you to touch on this. We are forbidden in the Mormon Church to view it. There's this awareness being raised right now with sexual addiction in the Mormon Church, and that could mean that you just look at it once in a while. So what is ethical porn, and how can this help us heal?
Right. Yes. Ethical porn, when I say I'm a fan of porn, I'm speaking of ethical porn. And so there are websites. And actually in my book, I have a whole
Mm-hmm.
list of resources in the chapter where I talk about purity culture. And it's places where people can access ethical porn. Ethical porn means the actors and actresses involved in making this intimate video, everyone is fairly compensated. They are paid for it. They're there because they want to be there. They are using adequate health protections. They're getting tested regularly for
Oh, okay.
STDs to protect themselves and other actors. They have to agree to be in the scene or not be in the scene. I really encourage people, if you're looking at Pornhub, it's not, you can't guarantee that the people there aren't being trafficked or forced or coerced to do something. So that's why I want people to instead be considering ethical porn for their
Okay.
interests and desires.
I think I'll do an episode on this because I hadn't really even thought about some of that. And also female friendly porn is something that there's become more of, is very fantasy based, and I know a lot of women like to have like a story related to it.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
there is some problematic porn out there that is destroying people's ability to be intimate, and there is some porn out there that is encouraging healthy sexuality. So do your research. Is that what you would say?
Right. Yes, absolutely. And if you have children, if you have teenagers, if they have not already been exposed on the internet to porn, they will be, even if they are just a kid, even if they are just 10 years old. So you want to be starting from the time the kids are little, talking to them about consent. Nobody can touch your body, even asking them, can I have a hug? Would you like a hug? Would you like Auntie Julie to give you a hug? Giving them permission to say yes or no, and getting used to owning that autonomy that they have, even as little people.
Teaching them to
Yes,
ask is something I
exactly.
think we don't cover as much.
Right. And to use their voice. And girls especially have received such damaging messaging. Oh, he's teasing you because he likes you. Oh, he threw that at you just because he likes you. No, that's not acceptable. So we need to be teaching children to use their voice. I don't like it when you throw things at me. I don't like it when you chase me or do this. I don't want that, to be able to get comfortable expressing what they like and don't like. So yeah, that's something also that I think is important. And we already talked earlier about consent and BDSM. And so those are important things also to be exploring. I also want people to become aware of the messaging around us in society at large. I mean, is it only skinny white females that are young that are like, that's only what's beautiful? Because I got news for you. We're all getting older if we're lucky. We're all going to get wrinkles. Women, we're often going to gain weight in menopause. Our hair's going to go gray. These are things, if we're lucky, we get to experience this and growing older. Some people, unfortunately, end up potentially with a disability or something that happens, but you're still a sexual being. You still enjoy sex and want to enjoy it with other people. So you better learn to love yourself now. It doesn't help to be down on yourself. And I'll love myself when I lose 30 pounds. No, love yourself today. Love yourself as you are. And so sometimes that can also mean when we're watching ethical porn, we want to see people like us reflected in there. So I'm married to a man now who's over 20 years my senior. And so sometimes we watch mature things together that have more mature themes. And, we both need to feel comfortable, and your body does change as you age. So educate yourself also about your body and what to expect as you get older, because there are just changes that are going to happen. So that's part of getting to know yourself. Consider touching yourself, and you can touch yourself very gently to start with, but touching your whole body so that you get comfortable knowing what you like, so that you can share it with a partner when someone is so fortunate to have that invitation to be your partner in the bedroom. You you get to teach them, this is what I like, and asking them, what do you like? Because I don't know, maybe the last person I was with, they really like this one thing, but maybe that horrifies you. Maybe you don't like that thing. I'm not a mind reader, and you're not a mind reader. So we have to have open conversation.
And you just practicing. I'm not trying to interrupt, but I just did an episode called Asking for What You Want in Bed. And we start with like the very basic ways that you can start to use your voice. And then you're like up more and more and more based on what me and my friend Gina are used to, because we're kind of advanced. So everyone, I'm going to link to this in the episode. I've also done one called Talking About Sex with my friend Brian. So these are great starting points. If you're really not used to actually using words, which I totally get, it can feel awkward, but I'm here for you. I've got some resources.
Nice. I love it. And this leads so perfectly into sexual values exercises. So making a yes, no, maybe list. And that was new for me. I didn't know anything about yes, no, maybe lists. And then I started researching to write my book. And there's a university in British Columbia called Simon Fraser University, or SFU, and they have a great yes, no, maybe list. And there are other online spaces as well. So some of the questions that people might be interested to get them started. How do you view your sexual orientation or identity? Are you comfortable with others knowing this about you? Yes, no, maybe, or unsure. How do you feel about sexting with words or photos? Yes, no, maybe, or unsure. Mm-hmm. Do you like or dislike sexy talking during sex? Do you like or dislike public displays of affection? Do you prefer lights on or off during times of sexual intimacy? Are you open to using sex toys either solo or with partners? How do you feel about discussing intimate sexual details with others who were not there?
Try and find a friend who you can talk to about this, because that can help. And it's also really fun.
It has. And, that's actually something that's very precious to me, and has always been a part of the way that I interact with serious partners. When we enjoy being together sexually, and usually in an evening, then the next day, I'll just bring it up again. Wasn't that fun last night? I really liked it when you did this. Oh, how did you like that? And it normalizes it. And if you're with someone else who also is working on recovery from purity culture indoctrination, it can be so healing and helpful to talk about sex in just a very matter of fact, fun, playful way. You can talk about it. I'm looking forward to our date tonight. I'm wearing something special, whatever, these sorts of things, to normalize talking about it with each other before and after.
And that's one reason why texting can be good. Like, you can start with what feels comfortable and build up. Is there anything else from the yes, no, maybe list you want to share?
Of course, there's some basics like, do you like being caressed? If so, where? How about pinched? How about restrained? If so, do you prefer having your hands or your legs restrained, or both? I mean, you can make your list as in-depth as you want to, and it may change over your life. I mean, we change, we grow and change, and so the things that we like sometimes also will change. I also want to encourage people to go to my YouTube channel and find the episode. I'll share you the link. It's with Dr. Stephen Davidson. He's a sexologist, and his whole talk to us at the last Shameless Sexuality event was all about kinks and fetishes.
Yeah, girl.
And it was so interesting, just fascinating, because we want to normalize the human experience of sexuality. It's a very wide range. It's a huge spectrum. So don't be hard on other people. Don't be hard on yourself. Be curious. Give yourself room to explore, and make an appointment with a secular therapist or religious trauma recovery coach, someone who understands purity culture recovery.
You sound perfect. Yeah. I was going to make sure to tell people there are people doing this passionately for a living. Janice is one of them. I think that would be a great place to start. You've got to get some therapy if you are resonating with any of this. Really get support. You may have no idea like the potential for joy and pleasure that is out there if you can learn how to open it.
You deserve it.
Yes, agreed. I mean, I really think pleasure is our birthright.
Yes, including sexual pleasure. That is so true. I'm so glad you said that.
I'm so glad to have met you, and I'm so glad for this episode, and I hope that we'll be able to do more. Everybody, please go and look at Janice's YouTube and everything I'm going to link to in the show notes. And please, the Shameless Sexuality Conference. It's going to be all online this year, so it's heavily discounted. I think also besides all the information, it might be good for some people who are post-religion to network with each other, see what other people are going through. So please go and get your tickets for that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Janice. Jan.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to everyone who followed me from Breakups, Broken Hearts, and moving on over to Sex and the Solo Girl. I love both. I'm having fun with both. And love my audience. I will see you next week. Bye. Bye, Janice.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Sex and the Solo Girl with Janice Formichella, the podcast for those who want to add more flavor to their relationships with themselves and others. If you liked today's episode, make sure to head over to Instagram and let her know. See you next week.